So from our perspective, I think what we're looking at doing is what we've done so far. Just a quick recap, just to put this in a bit of perspective. So what we did was, obviously we understood in the learning outcome one is that how how do we look at in general, organizations, the different types, what kind of communication can happen within the organization, especially when you're dealing with people. We looked at some context of, how communications to happen in the health and social care sector. We looked at some legislation, some, laws and acts which basically allow us to seek information, from public departments or, governmental offices in particular, where we want to look at, seeking information. And then we also briefly looked at how the structure of the organization is different within different setups, big, small, medium, and large. So when we look at GP surgeries, care clinics, we are looking at small setups. When we look at hospitals, we're looking at medium to large setups. And then obviously when we look at trusts in particular, the organizational structures can vary, communication patterns could vary. And then we have different types of communication happening across, which is horizontal, lateral, and obviously upwards communication happening within different departments, and how the dynamics of, management of these is done in the form of, understanding them as communication practices. So this is what we did in learning outcome one. Now, in order to progress this further in the learning outcome two, what we are looking at essentially is understanding team dynamics. So the key bits that we are going to look at is why is teamwork important specifically within a business or an organization. We will look at trying to contextualize this in the field of health and social care in particular, to see when we deal with a lot of people, because the healthcare sector in general, or the public services and the national health services sector in general is people oriented. So the idea is at some stage, we will see that people work independently. There is a bit of delegation of work which happens, but at some stage when when you become a part of the setup and you work within the organizations, what tends to happen is that you become inherently somehow somewhere part and parcel of large teams. And then we need to understand what are the benefits of working within team, what are the roles and responsibilities. Sometimes we do see that there are, when we work in teams, what tends to happen is when there is delegation of responsibility, or, why teams in particular, when we look at fail to accomplish, say, a certain task or objective given. And to a certain extent, what we do see also is that when, let's put it this way, we also see team dynamics. But when we look at team dynamics, we look at the management style and also the leadership style. So sometimes we do see that the teams are not able to achieve work or not able to accomplish the objectives is because the way the team was led by the leader or managed by the manager would, kind of configure it in a way wherein either you fall short or you exceed or meet the targets. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides. The presentation that I put together for learning outcome 2 has a lot of slides, but some of these slides, what we're going to do is basically understand, they're just basic slides for us to read and go through. But the key bits that we will understand in the learning outcome 2 with regards to some frameworks that we should get off is looking at, two models in particular. One is the Tuckman's model, which is something came across in terms of, when we study team dynamics and teamwork in particular. And the other one will be when we look at the Belbin's model, and for which what I'm going to do is we're going to discuss some of these, obviously, using the slides. But at a later stage, I'm going to try and send you some handouts, which will give you, further details and a bit of detailed reading to understand why when we look at managing people and resources in general and manage teams, look at orienting the individuals on the basis of their personality, their skill set, and also to a certain extent in terms of how they behave and react when they are put together as a part of, put together or to work together as a part of team. Is that okay?
Yep.
Good stuff. So getting on with learning outcome 2. Now, team, there are various definitions of team that we look at. but one of the ones that I put together on this slide is basically it stands for Together Everyone Achieves More. And over the years, there are lots of definitions of teamwork which have come across, but this one kind of stands out is because the word team itself has been expanded into something called Together Everyone Achieves More. So this was defined along with that, when we look at some of the other definitions defined by Margaret Mead and Tom Peters, is that when you look at innovation in general happening within organizations, you look at putting a lot of minds together, a lot of brains together, and that is where also teamwork tends to happen. When a lot of people come together, they look at innovative ideas, they look at tangential thinking, and that also leads to meaningful conclusions. And that is why teamwork in certain sectors does become really important. Now, in terms of how do we look at, there are a lot of terms that we've heard over the years is what makes a winning team, how do you define a team, or things like why is teamwork important? And these are basic questions that we always think of when we look at a lot of people working together, on a set particular task, and or given a work, certain goals and objectives which they have to accomplish together. One of the examples that I look at in the case of teamwork, and to explain that, is when you look at any particular sports, say for example, if you look at football, or you look at rugby, you look at any sport which involves teamwork. The reason why we look at this particular example is that here any one particular individual cannot accomplish or cannot have that side win a match or a particular tournament. So when you look at cricket, you look at look at football, you look at rugby, you look at hockey, you look at any sport wherein you have lots of people working together and coming together under a particular banner to be able to accomplish one goal, which is led by a manager, is a good example of why teamwork needs to be done and how team dynamics and the various skills of different people working under a particular banner comes across, and you have a winning team, or you have a set of people in a group achieving a particular objective of, say, winning a match or winning a tournament. So it is very important when we look at it from a context of, if we apply the same context and example into an organization, what we do get to see is that you have various departments within the organization, and you have admin, sales, marketing, operations. In the case of healthcare, we look at various departments which could be related to things like you have a reception, you have clinical staff, you at some point in time have doctors, a team of doctors, and then you have a team of specialists who look after different things. So they all work together, and at some stage they do a handover so that the specialist or the person relevant to that task would be able to take over and then bring it to a completion. So in the case of office, when we look at the dynamics, what you get to see is that if let's imagine an organization here. So for example, look at the example of Apple, for example, in this case, because they've been in the news recently because of the launch of the new iPhone. So when you look at the team which is working within the company to be able to bring out a new product, and they knew that they had a lot of pressure on them, that it's the 10th anniversary, and they wanted to launch a new model which kind of defines again the various features which consumers are expecting to get on the new iPhone. Now, the team working behind it was, or there was not, a set specific person working on this particular product, alone, or one specific team. So there were a number of people, and the number of people working on the iPhone to bring out the new model were about 2,100. Now, these 2,100 people were working in different departments. So some of them were in engineering, some of them were in wireless, some of them in manufacturing, production, marketing, sales, patents, things like that. Now, each particular group of people working within that team had a set specific responsibility, and their aim and their responsibility was to look at bringing the task given to a certain completion, to a certain admissible kind of completion according to the Apple standards, and then the next team would take over in kind of putting that or putting the whole product together. So when we look at the dynamics of how this team was chosen to work on launching the new products, the HR department in particular would have looked at bringing across engineers from various disciplines and various departments within the Apple as a company, as an organization, and they would have chosen them few to be able to work on this product. Now, some basic facets that they would have looked at before they put together this team would have been things like, do these people work together well? Do they know each other quite well? Will they be effective? A bit of bonding, networking, and communication between these set of people when they are brought together into a team. Will they be able to achieve that common objective which has been set? Do they have the same definition of understanding how the objectives have been set and what is actually required to be met to achieve that objective? And will they be able to kind of share and cooperate and coordinate with each other to be able to work effectively as a unit, so that at some stage when this is ready for launch or when this product is ready for market, they would kind of back each other quite well to be able to kind of come together and then at a stage have this something which is ready and to market in terms of the launch stage. So there are various aspects which the managers would have looked to put together this particular team. And the reason why this would have been done is there are some reasons. For example, the work required to be accomplished is gigantic. That means it is a large piece of work which cannot be accomplished or done or handled by one particular person or a group of persons. So that's why the team was required. The second reason that we can think of is why this team was created is because the diversity of the work which was required to be done. You cannot have a number of people or a group of people work together on every individual aspect of the product, and that is where they required a knowledge base, and that's why the team was kind of put together from different departments.
Yep.
So some of the other reasons that you can think of sometimes is that they wanted to bring across a group of people who are highly experienced with a certain set of people which could gain and work together, as a work in conjunction with the people having experience to gain experience, so that they can also get those skills which are required to work on products in the future or in the future pipeline of the company Apple. So what we can look at is we can look at some very distinct strategic reasons why sometimes teams are put together. So when we look at Brexit happening as an example within the political system and within the UK, now the Prime Minister has put together a team of people who are going to be looking at leading and doing the negotiations for the Brexit process. So when you look at David Davis, you look at Boris Johnson, you look at some of the key people who have been brought together because she felt that these people have prior experience, or they are the right set of people with the right skill set, attitude, behavior, whatever it is, for them to be able to take this forward. So she brought in some faces which were predominantly very active during the Brexit campaign, like Boris Johnson. She brought in certain people who have been kind of the pillar of the Tory party, have had lots of experience, have been in the successive governments in the past, and they have experience of dealing and leading negotiations with Europe. So the reasons could be fair, very many, but sometimes when you have to put a team together, what you have to look at is basic elements of how you put together people into teams so that they are able to work together would be the ones which are reasons of forming the team, and also the basic characteristics that you look at which are required to have an effective team, to have a team which is functional, understands each other, and is able to work in unison to achieve that objective. So some of these elements which are required for us to put together a team have been summarized on the slide here, which talk about things like good communication, social skills. They enjoy a bit of independence. They enjoy a bit of empowerment, in the sense they are people which do not need to be led on a daily basis. They have that sense of understanding to be able to lead bits and pieces of work or objectives independently. They are accountable. They kind of relish the fact that there is a bit of an accountability when they work together in a team. They understand what are shared goals. They understand that sometimes this is the work that is required to be done by me, and then after that I have to hand over. So they are not extremely or possessive from that aspect, wherein or they want to kind of do the work on their own. And they also have a sense of understanding of, if there is a conflict which does arise, then what are the processes or possible outcomes of resolving the conflict, how conflict resolution can happen in the cases wherein, sometimes when you work in a team and you work with shared goals and objectives, how do you resolve these? They have a basic sense of understanding of these elements when people, are put together in teams. So when an HR manager or when somebody as a leader or a manager puts together a team, these are the basic elements that they look at from a point of view of, putting a team together.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this question here. Have you worked as a part of a team in the role that you do?
No, because obviously I work one-to-one with people. So, it's just us two here. We don't really, I have worked in a house before where there's been more than one carer, but that's just been because there's been two different people with cerebral palsy.
Right. But in terms of when you say, I'm pretty sure that you would have worked as a part of a team. Now, what we look at is sometimes there is something called dotted line reporting or functional working, and there is something which is called administrative reporting. So when you work, obviously at some stage when you take care of patients, or you take care of the work that you do in your sector, at some stage you do maybe fill in some reports, and these reports go to your manager or your supervisor, and then in turn that supervisor signs something off, or that might go to his manager, his line manager. Mm-hmm. So there might not be you might be working as a part of a team, but wherein you are maybe, from my understanding, in the front line. That means you're dealing with the clients or the patients directly, but at the back end there is an operational setup that you provide some information to, and they take out or reports or whatever it is, and then the side of team actually then passes that information upwards or laterally to various departments for them to be able to process. Yeah. So you might get to see your manager more often, and between you and him, you form a team, because he might have a number of care workers who work and do similar activities, but he or she might be responsible for managing a number of care workers. But as a group, if somebody is to look at it from an outside perspective, you are a part of his team.
Okay, yeah.
In terms of your team, you look after a number of patients or clients that you work with, and they are an integral part of your team. So your team is your patients and the people that you work with directly. Your supervisor's team would be the number of care workers within that, and the patients or the people that you look after, that become a part of his team. And when he looks at his managerial line, he would probably have somebody who manages him, and that would become he, along with yourself and the patients and the people that you take care of, become a part of his larger team. Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, there are certain things that we look at when teams are formed. So, for example, the reason why we look at sometimes putting together people or grouping people together is we try and understand from the point of view of psychology that a number of people behave in a particular way, or they kind of react to a certain situation in a particular way, and to a certain extent, when you look at grouping them together, you group them together because of their skill set, you group them together because of the kind of behavior they have or the skills or traits that they show, and last but not the least, to a certain extent, you bring them together from a point of view of their experience and background as well.
Okay. Yep.
And one of the key things that we look at when we put teams together, a group of people together to work in a particular team to accomplish a particular task, we look at the aspect of motivation as well. Now, sometimes what happens is when you try and put a team together and you have two sets of people, one of them is highly ambitious, the other is kind of quite covert and passive. So what does tend to happen in that, if you put these two people together, would be that you'll have always somebody who is leading, the same person who is quite aggressive and quite ambitious would be leading, and you'll have the other person which will always be a laggard or kind of dragging the other person down. So when sometimes teams are formed, we look at motivation to a certain extent, and we also look at basic characteristics of things like passion, enthusiasm, ambitious nature of the person, and that's why we try and group together people which kind of, when they are in a group, they feel kind of they're comfortable in each other's company, but at the same point in time they understand the goals and they are able to work and work together. Sometimes you will see managers ask people to volunteer to get into teams, and you do see that sometimes what tends to happen is that people become a part of a team, they start to work together, but over a point in time they kind of drop off from that team, is because they do feel that they do not have the same set of qualities or requirements which are required for them to be in that particular team. So within the healthcare profession, we do see there are different teams which are formed, and the reason why we form these different teams is, I'm going to a fact wherein, again, going back to something which I would want to correlate to, is that when we group them together on the basis of skill set, experience, expectations, and motivations.
Okay.
So imagine a scenario wherein, for example, you're fresh off the college, you're fresh off a uni, and you're eager and obviously looking to get into a job, and at some point in time you want to get in, and you just want to get in and then start doing your bit.
Yep.
But if you had a number of years of experience within that role, at some point in time, what tends to happen is you start to become a bit choosy, because you've gained experience, you have skill, you have the knowledge now, and you're no longer a fresher. So what you do is you start to become a bit of, start to exercise a bit of pickiness and choosiness in terms of picking your roles that you want to work further in and gain experience.
Yeah.
At this stage, when you've had a number of years of experience, you're quite firm to a certain extent and adamant to a certain extent that, okay, I've got this line experience in this particular line, this is what I love doing, this is what my skill set is, and this is where I want to be if I want to progress into further roles or into senior positions.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all aspects of how sometimes we see team development happening at various levels. So we look at team development happening or putting together a team at for a number of people when they're fresh into a job, or they are freshers as we call it, and they are having the first bit of experience in terms of working within an organization or a business. Then you get to see that there are skills, there are characteristics, or the attitude and personalities are slightly different from a set of people who have already been in the business, have been working for a while, and that is where you get to see that the team dynamics have to be very different when you select a team amongst those set of individuals. So here, what I would do is basically introduce one of the frameworks that we need to look at of team building, and this is called the Tuckman's model of team building. Now, this particular model that we look at, when it came about, obviously, there was a grouping done wherein what the author proposed was that there are 4 stages of how you build teams, and these 4 stages are called forming, storming, norming, and performing. So what he basically predicted was that when he did some experiments in terms of how teams should be put together in organizations, they did a study, and that study basically kind of came up with 4 basic quadrants of how teams should be put together if they have to be effective, if they have to be successful, and if the organizations have to look at achieving their targets. The forming stage basically spoke about that in this stage, basically what happens is you put a lot of people together, they do not understand the common objective or the aims which have been set, and they are still kind of looking at their own individual strengths and weaknesses, their own roles, and this stage allows them to come together, and somebody within this, when you're forming that team, somebody within this team starts to look at taking a leadership role, and that is where he starts to kind of identify the skills, the strengths, the characteristics of individual people, so that he can group them together and put them together into some sort of a group. So the forming stage looks at bringing a lot of people together to be able to start the process of team formation or team development. And here the members are, or the group of people who come together are kind of primarily looking at understanding their own strengths and weaknesses, understanding the other person, getting used to the other person, and that stage basically refers to something called forming.
Yeah.
Now, after the initial period of getting together and, say, for example, there is a class activity which is happening and the teacher says, okay, can I get 4 volunteers? 4 people raise their hand. They come together, they have a bit of insecurity, lots of questions in their mind, what they've been asked to do or will be asked to do, what roles will I be given in that team to be able to do. So those are the bits that you look at in that stage. Now, once you're put together as a group in a class and you're starting to do, you've been given an activity, then the 4 of you start, or, I'm just going by an example here, in that group discussion, the 4 people which have been put together, they start to kind of interact with each other. And what they do is when they start interacting, they look at understanding, breaking down the objective, understand this is my opinion, this is your opinion. So there's a bit of, discussions which begin to happen. It could be arguments, discussions, heated discussions, but that they tend to kind of, start to happen because they want to challenge the idea and the thinking process of the other person to see if you are right or if I'm right, if this is the perspective or that's the perspective. And that kind of a stage, when we look at understanding that, okay, we've been asked to do a presentation and we have to do a bit of research on this. So there is where you start to highlight that, okay, I can do a bit of research because I've got that knowledge, I've got that skill, I can be good in public speaking. And you start to kind of, set those tolerances within the group so that the other person understands what you can do or you cannot do. And that stage is predominantly called as, storming stage. So here you're testing the other individual within the team to be able to see that whether he or she would kind of tolerate this, let you get into this role, or would there be a bit of a discussion and a fight about it that I want to do this or you want to do that. And that stage was called as storming. Now, the norming stage was essentially wherein you understood what your role is going to be within that particular group. And you know that this is what I can do, this is what I can contribute. You get into that comfort zone of understanding that, okay, this is something that I'll be able to do and contribute. And this is what the others will also let me get into. And this is related to my strengths and weaknesses. So, this is kind of then more or less in a situation that you have been given that role. Everybody has understood that this is something that you're going to do. And they leave you to it so that there is no further discussions on topics around that, or no further discussions in the role that you have been given or you have taken up within that team. And here at some stage, because now everybody starts to become comfortable in the responsibility or the role that they have taken within the group, they tend to then enjoy each other's company. They tend to get into a mode wherein you are seemingly now working together as a team. You're going over that process. You've kind of overcome that process of, getting to know each other, having a bit of innovation, discussions, and then you've got into a stage wherein you understand that this is something which I'm going to do, this is my position, this is your position, and I need to respect. So at this stage, what happens is you get to see that the people clearly understand that who's going to be leading the activity, who's going to be presenting the activity, who's going to be doing the background work, and who's going to be supporting that particular activity. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And the last stage that we look at when we talk about performing is basically when all the dynamics of this particular stage, of team have been formed to a certain extent. At that level, when there is a calm, there's a composure, and you understand what your role and responsibilities are, and you know where you can contribute and what are the areas that you can work together in, the teams or the people who've been put together in that group actually then start to perform. So they are performing at their utmost capability. That means that this is something which the team is or the group has given me the task for, assigned the task to me for, and I need to complete this for them to be able to move forward. So there's a sense of responsibility which comes in. You become, kind of vigilant in the sense that if this is not done, then the team could suffer. The goal or the task that we've been put together to do will actually suffer. And you respect each other from an aspect of the contributions that you make within that group, so that you are all in a mode wherein you are performing to your utmost or most effective capacity, and that is where you start to look like a team. So imagine the group which was given a task to do a presentation on, say, sources of finance, for example. They came together. they volunteered, 4 of them came together, a bit of inhibitions, get to introduce each other. Okay, I can do this, I can do that. This forming stage was done. And in the norming stage, they looked at, okay, I've got this experience, I can bring this across. Once that was understood, they got together to it and they kind of distributed the task that, okay, we need to put this together. Sources of finance means external, internal. Then we look at bank, loan, all those things, mortgages, stuff like that. So everybody said, okay, I can pick this up, I can deliver this topic, I can get some background on it. And when you got into that mode, you were kind of in that mode wherein you understood what you are bringing in, what you are responsible for, and how you can present this. And that stage was norming. And towards the end, because within the storming stage, it was understood that, okay, you are able to speak quite well, you're confident, you have an overall knowledge on the topic, so you will present, we will assist, and everybody got into that role wherein they respected. There's a bit of a mutual respect which develops, and then you kind of tend to, delegate some parts of the job to people who they feel are relevant and will be able to bring across that to a closure. And that stage helps you look at understanding something called the performing stage.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, sometimes when you look at this in an organization, what tends to happen is you will see that a change in leadership, for example, in an organization. Sometimes you will see in various departments, there is lack of motivation, the performance is not there, the department is not able to achieve bonus or incentives because of the goals not being reached. But when you have a change in the manager, or you have a different person taking over that department, he brings across or she brings across a different perspective, and that perspective begins to kind of instill something which begins to show from a point of view of performance, or from a point of view of the team getting together, and some of the basic conflicts being resolved. And the major thing that the person tries to bring in is that they understand what were the areas which have contributed to non-performance. And that person or the manager is looking at the drawbacks first. And once the drawbacks have been understood, what he looks at is he reconstitutes the goals, he looks at rearranging the team, and that rearranging of the team essentially is done from an aspect to understand, okay, this is something that you really have been doing for a number of years, you want to change, you go into this particular role, and he switches over a few roles, brings people into a comfort zone, and he then starts to put together a team which at some point in time, because of the changes being introduced, becomes a team again, becomes to kind of starts to perform again. And that process can only be seen when you kind of see a change being brought across, because what they see is sometimes you get to hear the word or the phrase wherein we need a fresh breath of air. We need somebody to lead this team again. So we need a bit of change happening within this department, so that somebody new coming into that department or taking over that team brings in a bit of fresh perspective. And when things are looked at from a different perspective or from a fresher perspective, it then starts to kind of pump in a new life into that particular team or in that department. And that's where you start to see that people become motivated again. You see them energized, or kind of because of the fresher perspective being brought in, you see that they start to kind of work together again to be able to work effectively as a team. So this particular model is what you will get to see being practically implemented in pretty much all organizations when they put together some sort of a team, or they look at development of team, or they start to put together groups of people to achieve larger tasks or objectives within a particular department or within a particular organization. And some of these team building exercises happen when you look at training sessions being done. A group of people from different departments being brought together into a training session, and that also inherently is a team building exercise, because sometimes you do not have these goals very clearly explained or why you're putting this together because of strategic objectives. But in the process, when you get to see activities like people from different departments being brought across into a training, volunteers being asked for to contribute to a particular objective. And the idea here is that the organization is not looking at kind of imposing that you need to work on this new project, but they look at getting volunteers to come together And then that is the process where they start to put a team together to be able to move them into a direction or into a new role, which will become which at some stage or at a later stage will become a team, and that team will then be given some responsibilities to kind of work on or accomplish. Now, there are responsibilities that we look at when you look at team formation and the putting together of team. There are different aspects of what each member would be given as a role to play, and then the other bits would be that when you put together teams, there are certain common things that most of the individuals working within that group or as a team need to understand. So in larger organizations, when you look at say for example, sticking to the example of Apple that we've taken today. So when you look at if the product was ready, when the product is ready and the launch has to happen, that means the product has to be taken to the market, then in those cases, what tends to happen is the marketing department will put together a team internally of people who understand how product launches have been done in the past. And these set of people which are brought across to look at bringing this product to market or announcing it to say, the press or the media, unveiling the product in the press or media, would then have the same understanding in terms of things which are required to be maintained. Say, for example, secrecy. That they have to have a code of conduct in which they need to ensure that everything which is being done to bring this product to an unveiling, say on a certain particular date, is required to go through a process wherein everything is secretive in the organization, because that's how Apple culture is. But at the same point in time, none of the details of the product could be shared with teams outside the team that they're working in. So they have common goals. There's a bit of a structure which comes in, wherein there are reviews which are happening on a daily basis, completion tasks or work which has been assigned and has been completed is being monitored and is being effectively reviewed. The roles given within the team would not be overlapping, because here the person brought in to work on that particular task will be competent, would have the experience and the skill set and the attitude to work within that role so that it becomes a success. And then when you look at this particular whole process of launch, there's a bit of a timeline which is associated with it, because the date cannot be postponed or preponed because the invites have been sent out to the press. So when you look at that, those are the dynamics that we look at, which are there in winning teams or strong teams, is that they understand a common goal, they have a particular structure to which they work with, they understand their roles, and their roles very meticulously, in the sense they understand the start and the finish, where they have to start, where they have to finish, and they are able to work under pressure or under tight timeline for them to be able to bring certain, say for example, this task of product launch to a closure. Now, in effect, what we will look at is, when you look at putting together teams, there are roles which members of the team kind of look at taking up. So when you put together people who have a lot of experience and people who are fairly new to that particular role but want to gain experience or build that experience, what you will do is you look at the role of coaching and mentoring, and that is something that we'll also look at a later stage. But this aspect of coaching, and when you have a team leader, when does the team leader become a coach and when does the team leader act as a mentor, is something that we also need to understand when we look at team working and team dynamics. Now, certain basic skills that we look at when we look at putting together teams that we discussed in the beginning of the presentation was that we looked at certain basic factors like communication, and in accordance with some of those basic factors, what we look at is, once the team is formed, what are the basic qualities which the team or the members of the team actually exhibit. So we looked at two aspects. One was, we looked at certain qualitative factors which are required for people to come in and work in a team. And those aspects were things like, when you put together people in a team, you're looking at good communication skills, you're looking at people who can depend on each other, you can look at understanding of shared goals, and also to a certain extent they understand that there will be conflicts, there will be discussions, arguments, but there is always a way to work together to close those conflicts and arguments and to work towards a shared goal. So those are basic skills that are required. for us to put together people in teams or start to look at the process of team development. Now, once the team has been put together, what are the inherent qualities that you look at that they should be able to develop within that team so that it works, stays, and delivers as a team? And those qualities are listed on this slide that we talk about, things like trust. So there are people within the team who have more experience, have less experience. So we get into the role of coaching. So sometimes what you'll see is you'll automatically understand this person that I speak to has more knowledge, has more experience within that field. So you kind of start to look up to him and to ask for assistance in terms of some answers. And sometimes you get into that role wherein you understand that I can always go back to this person because this person gives me the right guidance and is able to give me the right answers, which help me in developing my skill set and also enhancing my knowledge. Yeah. Sharing of information is one of the key assets that you have to look at when you have a functional team. So information is shared, and information which is in the public domain or which can be shared is shared between the members of the team. There's a lot of flexibility which you will see that team members exhibit. In particular, when they have to work together, they are able to cooperate well. They kind of tend to work well together. When sometimes you get to see that I've been overloaded with work. I'm kind of falling back behind on this particular task. Can you pick this up and help me with this? So they kind of work together, and it's not seen as a gesture that, okay, I'm doing this, I've done that, why should I do your job? No, that kind of an attitude is not seen when people are put together in teams and they're working together. And obviously they have these social skills, or skills as we call them, is that they will be considerate, they will be passionate, there will be a bit of compassion that you'll get to see, is that they exercise for each other, and they generally tend to look after each other. Because when you look at teams which work within engineering, production, you look at a small team within the GP surgery, the nursing team, for example, they all tend to work together in the sense they help out the other. If, for example, in certain cases they have an overload of work, or in some cases they're having trouble with dealing with patients, so they tend to kind of have those basic skills of looking out for each other and helping out each other in times when you need professional help. Mm-hmm. So there are qualities that we look at when you are trying to put together a team, and when you are a part of a team or as working as a group, then you need to have these qualities which allow you to kind of effectively work as a team and continue to deliver objectives which have been set up for that team. Mm-hmm. Now, the underlying theme that we look at is communication. Now, this is something that we will come across throughout this unit, is that there is a very let's put it this way, without communication you cannot interact with people, whether you're working alone or you're working as a part of team or as a larger part of a setup. So communication is something that we need to look at when we work with people. If you are in a job or in a particular role wherein you work alone and you don't tend to interact with people on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, then you will see that most of your communication will tend to happen through mediums like email, telephone, or through team meetings and things like that. Mm-hmm. But if you're working with a lot of people and you're a part of a team, then you tend to have different types of communication which happen on a daily basis. So because you kind of work on common objectives, you have been given similar tasks, or you're a part of a particular department which is working on a particular task, you will have lots of different types of communication. And here the communication could be, in some cases is verbal because you see each other quite often, you sit opposite each other. In some cases, the communication could be non-verbal, wherein you're looking at resorting to mediums of, email, telephone, and other forms, bringing in IT. And last but not the least, sometimes the communication is formal and sometimes the communication is informal. So if you're brainstorming on a particular idea, what you'll tend to see is that you're having a communication over a cup of tea or a cup of tea, putting out together. These are bits and pieces that you tend to kind of pick up, because this at some stage would lead to meaningful conclusions when you're working together as a team. So communication is something that we will look at in a bit more detail, and some of the slides that I have put together now talk about, what are the types of communication that you can do. And sometimes you see that we get to hear and we get to realize that when we are communicating, sometimes you will see people or members of the team become a bit more assertive or aggressive. Sometimes you will see some members only respond if they are asked, and they kind of, listen more than tend to communicate or, verbally speak quite often. You will also see that some people within a team do not, would like to communicate in terms of completing the bits of work or the actions which they have been given. And those then kind of help us identify behaviors to a certain extent in terms of what kind of communication you can do with a particular member within the team. So leaders or managers who manage group members or team members tend to be in a position wherein they are more assertive. That means they are quite open to communication. They are quite direct. And in some cases, what you will see is that sometimes when they're asking for suggestions, for example, if there's a group activity which has been given, and within that group activity, you tend to see that the manager is asking for ideas. So here, in that mode, the manager is more in the mode to get hold of certain ideas which are coming across from the members in that team. And the idea is and the reason why he asks that question is, can we look at a few suggestions in terms of how to solve this problem? So the idea there is that he wants the team and the members within the team to start talking, get talking, and start discussing, so that he can at some stage come to a meaningful conclusion or kind of guide that conversation in that direction when everybody gets talking. So there are different behaviors that you will get to see wherein within a team, sometimes you have to kind of retort to looking at certain behaviors wherein you get the members of the team talking. And sometimes it could be when you start to listen more responsively. Sometimes it could be that you kind of come into the room, you do a presentation, and with that presentation, you are able to kind of lay out what is required to be done. And then you get the team talking, divide them into groups, and, you get them talking in the sense, can we do this? Can we do that? And you try and get some tasks accomplished in that sense. And sometimes when managers are asking for suggestions or ideas to come, to get, let's put it this way, to get some work done, they are looking at aspects of things like involvement. They want more involvement from the members within the team. Sometimes they are looking at delegating the decision-making ability to team members so that they feel they are more involved in the discussion and they have more responsibility in the task which has been assigned. Sometimes you will see that they kind of tend to ask for these suggestions is because they want to iron out certain problems or issues which have been creeping up within the team, but nobody is bringing them up for discussion. So one of the ways to get that, get them, starting to discuss these issues and problems would be to give them a particular problem and let them discuss about that problem to start seeing that, okay, if these are objectives or these are objections which are actually coming up, which will then pinpoint or kind of lead to an issue which needs to be discussed. So you will need to look at some of these behaviors which we need to understand, so that from the point of view of team dynamics, what we do get to see, if you understand these behaviors, then you are able to kind of pinpoint and reach a conclusion in terms of why these choices are being made and why these choices are being discussed from a point of view of in a particular team. Okay. You will also see sometimes, I'm not too sure, but let's put it this way, that sometimes what happens is you want to discuss something with your manager. Now, the reason what you do is, can I have a word with you in private? Can I discuss this with you separately? So you tend to discuss those on a one-on-one basis, is because that information could be sensitive. You would want specific guidance. It could be an issue which is specifically being faced by you, or in some cases, you do not want to be seen as somebody who does not have the experience or the understanding of what was being discussed, and you seek that clarification in private or in a one-on-one discussion. So some of these things you get to see happening within team dynamics is that you will see there are some people who do not mind, and they will ask all sorts of questions within the group itself. Some of them shy away from asking those questions and would pick out a later time for them to ask these questions on a one-on-one basis. And these choices, sometimes when they are made on the basis of how a person is, basically how the person's personality is, and what kind of personality do they kind of show when they are working together as a part of a team. So sometimes you will see people who are aggressive. Sometimes you will see they are quite dominating. You will see people who kind of have a very laid back attitude. So they will kind of sit back in a discussion, not ask many questions, but they tend to write down certain points or certain clarification points, which at some stage they will ask on a one-on-one basis. And in some cases you will see people who are quite assertive. That means they want to look at a bit of they kind of tend to be show-offs. That means if they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they tend to be assertive because they want to show that they have the knowledge and would want to be seen as somebody in the room wherein they are knowledgeable. So they try to get respect by showing assertiveness in that kind of by exhibiting that behavior. So team dynamics is something that we need to understand. When we look at the formation of team and team development, we understand something from the point of view of Tuckman's model. But when you have been put together in the team and you want to understand detailed workings of and the dynamics of working together in a team, then we look at understanding something called the Belbin's team role model. And this is something wherein the particular author, Dr. Meredith Belbin, actually came across with 9 different types of roles, which he classified that when you put together people in a team and they've been working for for some time, then what you will see is people tend to identify their skills and their characteristics with certain types of roles and responsibilities working within a team. So he came across with these 9 different types of roles, and these 9 different types of roles were classified as somebody who's a planter, somebody who's a coordinator, somebody who works within a team is an evaluator, somebody is an implementer. Some of the members in the team are complete finishers. That means given a task, they will take it to completion. Some of them are resources invigilators. That means people who are very good at managing resources, coming up with resources. Some of them kind of lead and shape the discussions when they are happening, or lead and shape basically the type of tasks which have been given. So they leave an impression or an imprint on their working within the team. Some of them are absolute team workers. They will take up any task given to them or delegated to them. They are very cooperative. And in some cases, you will see people who are specialists. So that means they will only pick and choose those roles within the team when they're put together, when the roles actually match their skill set and their priority or their area of knowledge or skills they have. And for each of these different type of roles, Belbin basically defines certain characteristics or contributions these people are to make, and then he all kind of justified to a certain extent what would be the weaknesses of these people who identify with a particular type of role. And that is something which he put together into some sort of a matrix. And this is what I'm going to do is try and send you a handout on this, so that it's a concise reading handout which you understand why do you call a person within a team or identify somebody within a team that he or she works within the planter role. That means they kind of tend to be more creative, imaginative. They look at different perspectives when asked to think about a particular solution or a particular problem, and they are very good at solving difficult problems. So they are kind of people who basically do not accept things quite easily, and they want to ask a lot of questions. They want to reason a lot, and when they have had that reasoning, then only they will tend to accept tasks or jobs given to them. So they see a larger objective or a rationale of why this job is being done, what is important in the job, and what it will accomplish. So these kind of roles is what he came about when the teams are formed, and when within the team you want to look at identification of specific roles and specific characteristics and trait which each team member actually exhibits.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, some of the other bits that I would look at, and I think probably I would stop here, would be bits that we want to understand when you know that a certain number of people have been put together into a team, how the team is formed, and at some stage when you know the team is formed, the team is working, what you do is you get in and you want to identify the specific types of people which and the contributions they bring in into this particular role. So after that, what tends to happen is we tend to look at what you call let's put it this way, the contribution of managers and leaders in terms of tweaking certain certain, let's put it this way, certain aspects of the team, so that the teams can become winning teams, performing teams, effective teams, or people are able to effectively achieve a task or a goal which has been set. And that is where what we will need to do is study certain aspects of the different leadership styles, the different management styles, and sometimes how you see managers put together teams and what are the objectives that they have in the background of putting together these teams, so that the teams which are put together can actually accomplish those objectives or goals set for the year, or for a particular task.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yep, that's great.
Right. So, bit of just to summarize here, what we are looking at is understanding why people are put together in teams, how teams are formed, when teams are formed, what kind of specialist roles people can take within those teams, and what we need to be able to do is identify the forming of teams with a Tuckman's model or a framework. And once the teams have been put together, you need to know the characteristics of people, what kind of skills or characteristics they need to have when they are working within the team. And sometimes when you look at team working, what are the various different roles within that team the individuals can take, so that we can better identify and group them together to be able to work effectively.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Good stuff. So I'll stop here. I'm going to send you these two handouts. I think presentation for this particular unit are more or less, I think, already on Moodle. They're already on Moodle.
Okay, excellent.
Have a quick look. So, any questions on so far?
No, that's good.
Okay, so I think, yeah, we've got the L2 teamwork, which is already there, and I'll put the L3 presentation on Moodle as well.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Lindsay. I will then catch up with you on the 8th with regards to some more discussions on this unit.
Excellent.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks. Bye.